Well, it's good to see each of you this evening. We have a lot of seats in the middle, not many on the sides. We've got folks still coming in. Well, look at that. That's so nice. Good deal. Did it then. And I did this. Like that. No. It doesn't do it now. It's not. We'll figure it out. Good deal. Okay, it's nice to see each of you this evening. We appreciate your presence, and there may be some new people here. There may not be, but anyway, it's good to have everybody that's here. And I hope that our study will be a profitable one for each one of us. I'd like to begin our class with prayer at this time, and I'm going to ask Alan, if he will, to lead us in a short prayer, please.
Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the opportunity to be here, to look at your word and study from it, and relating to it with the reading of your word. Help us to study better and of your will for us. And pray, Father, that you bless you and speak to us in this time.
Amen. That was breathing. This picture that we've started with tonight is probably not like it was in Bible times, because you probably had to make the bread that morning. And yet, what did Jesus tell us to pray for? Our daily bread. See, we go to the grocery and just get us a collection of all the things that we like. And his main thing was, give us this day our daily bread. And the bread was very important to them. So we're going to talk more about bread. I didn't quite get the animals tonight. We may get to those next week, but I promise they're coming. We just had to find a barn to keep them in until we got could get them here. So at any rate, let's talk where we were last week. I want to talk about the situation with the wine press, wine, and some few things like that as we continue. I'm going to go over what we talked about briefly. That is the great pool at Gibeon, and it's mentioned in a biblical account that's very important. It is the story about Abner, who was for David, and the son, who was, I'll get them right in a minute. Abner, who was rebelling, and Joab, who was for David. And so they gathered on either side of that pool and had this battle, and a lot of them were killed. But that is a place where there could be water. There was water. But the main thing for this lesson is that at this place, there was also, in addition to this pool of Gibeon, which is later mentioned by Jeremiah, there were 63 wine cellars that were found by the excavators. Space for 19,000 gallons of wine. So we talked about those people who met the Israelites. They said we had these wine skins and they were fresh when we left the house, and we had all this bread, and it was really fresh, just this morning. Now it's moldy and everything's going bad, and we need help. And so that the Israelites to make an agreement with them that didn't turn out to be all that bad after all, but because the Lord helped them in the valley of Ajalon. But that's an amazing thing, isn't it? That right there near Jerusalem, there would be that much need for wine to have it available, you see, probably commercial. They would be selling it and so on. And in addition, there were places, things like this, like the jar handle found that had the name of Gibeon on the jar handle. That's really significant because it means that you have evidence that this is the place of Gibeon. I know somebody could have moved it from another place, but there were a lot of things, and so that was really helpful. And then a little piece that was a piece of broken pottery that said Gibeon, vineyard of, and had the man's name and his father's name. So that's really pretty interesting to know some of those people who were in that business. Hezekiah built storehouses across the country, several of them, in his time. And he had things like grain and wine and oil there. And they used big jars to put these in, like this jar that you see here from Hazor. And you see jar handles that are there. And those jar handles, all of these happen to be what are called lamellic, L-M-L-K. It means la is two, M-L-K is M-E-L-E-C-H, Melech, that's the king. So it's to the king. And so that's a short form of saying that this is for the king. This is your taxes that you will pay. In addition to this, there were several different towns. These were found at Lachish. But there were other towns like Hebron and some other places where they had these storage bins. And they would keep all of these things that were brought in that were the tax items from the people. These are just the little handles that would have been on the jars, on the outside of the jar, like that. In other words, going like this. And that's the way you'd pick it up. But it's a big jar. The jars were very large. And one of the themes that you see is this one that's here on the right, bottom. And that is, it's a kind of a winged bird of sorts. And so what all of those mean and why they were chosen, whether they had a contest to see who could pick the winning design, I don't know. But that gives you an indication of what they were trying to do at that particular time. So there we are now with the particular one that I was talking about. And then here are some things. This is as far as we got. In a place over in Jordan, right along the Jordan River in the Jordan Valley, there's a town called Teles Sadiya. And a professor from the University of Pennsylvania worked here back in a long time ago. And he wrote, incidentally, a lot of the national, or edited the National Geographic volume that's on Life in Bible Times. I've forgotten the exact title of it, but it's a very fine book even till today. And they found this bronze wine set that goes back to the period of 1300, 1200 BC. And you will see that it has a little jug lid up there. It has a filter of some sort on it that you could pour the wine through to be sure it was good or was, pure, whatever you were looking for in that regard. Moving further now, beyond what we were doing last week, the Shulamite girl, the girl that Solomon, assuming he wrote the book Song of Solomon, and she said to him, "Do not stare at me because I am swarthy." Why was she swarthy? She said, "Well, the sun has burned me. My mother's sons," she didn't call them her brothers, "my mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the caretaker of the vineyards, but I have not taken care of my own vineyard." So she's kind of saying, I spent more time helping the family than I did helping myself. And we hear that story a lot, don't we? That people simply do not take care of themselves because they're busy taking care of everybody else in the family. And in the Neot Kedumim that I mentioned to you, there is a portion that is called the Song of Solomon Garden. And then the Song of Solomon Garden, they have an illustration of this very passage. And here you see there are some vines that are left but they're just about all gone. There's not much there at all that you would find of any interest. See, right there's just a few, and you might find a few others along the way. And so that's a vineyard that's been neglected. So sometimes vineyards were neglected, and that's not a good thing, of course, for anyone's own property or life or whatever it might be. I want to move beyond this now into, I have not taken care, we talked about that, I read that. And so now comes the crushing of the olives. How did they do that? We've got to get this food into the house so that we can use it. And it's not enough just to say, I wish I had some olive oil this morning, but we've got to do something. So, of course, always there could be the olives that they would eat, you know, the little portions of olives. They would pull fresh off the tree. And at Gezer, they have some of these that have been located. They're older ones, and they're still in use. And this is one of the presses. Now, what this is simply a screw. It's made of wood, the whole thing. And I've seen several of these in different museums in Israel. Israel has a lot of museums. Not really great museums, but a lot of them. They have several great ones. The Israel Museum in Jerusalem is, and the Eretz Israel Museum in Tel Aviv is a great one. And personally, I really like the Heck Museum at the University of Haifa. I think it's very nice. But all through the country, in some of the small towns, there will be little museums. I mean, everywhere they dig, everywhere they work in a field, they find things that are from archaeology. I mean, that's what we call it. This is the old things that are being dug up by them. Somebody starts to build a new road. Somebody starts to build a new house. They find things. They have to wait until the Antiquities Department comes out and decides that this is okay, you can go ahead here. Or we must do an emergency dig. And so they will continue to work, you know, there for a little while. And of course the contractor who's got all of his money tied up and all the equipment, he's hoping that they'll get through real quick. And I don't hear of any corruption in that regard, but nonetheless it might happen at times. So what you have here, this screw comes down on this right here. I'll show you in a second what we've got here. This is the one right there. Under that, they would put a bag. I'll show you examples of it in a moment. It's full of the olives, and that comes down on there as you turn the screw and crushes the olives. Now we're ready to put the olives into an olive press. And so the next thing, this also at Gezer, and this one had just been used. I mean, that looks like oil on it. It is oil on it. And they didn't oil it this morning. This was the what we're talking about. This is the olive where the olives were. And so you just simply take this handle, and people can do it, or you could hook up a mule or two, a donkey, to this, and you go round and round and round and round and so on. And that's the way they crush them, so that then they're able to put them in something else. Here's another way of crushing, and this is fairly common. You see these a good bit. This is at Katzrin in the Golan Heights. Katzrin is the place where they have a village set up. It's like Nazareth village that several of you probably have been to, which is first century, the time of Jesus. But this one is Talmudic. That is about 500 A.D. And it shows life as it was at that particular time. So you will see examples, but they're pretty much the same. Life was the same. And for many of us who are older, life was pretty much the same until we had, machinery that would help with certain things. And so it didn't change a lot through the centuries, but then in given places there would be manufacturing and so on that could begin. So you see these stones that have been cut out. When we talk about, you can begin to think about this now, when we talk about the life of people, what kind of work they did, what kind of occupation they had, and what would you say was one of the big jobs that were available in those days? Can't hear it. What? Farming, yes, for sure, farming. What? Stone cutting. Stone cutting. That's going to be one of the biggest. Because all the building that Herod the Great did, you remember that? He had to have all this work going on. And of course, in this sort of thing, then what if somebody wanted an inscription in those days? They had to have a trained cutter who could cut letters as well. So that'll be real important, and maybe we hadn't thought about that. And when we come to Jesus as a carpenter, it's going to include that. See, carpenter's not what it says. Okay? Got you thinking? I want you to think. All right, now, using the oil. What do they use it for? Well, baking, cooking, medicine for people, on sometimes sores, on the animals. If they get cut somehow because they had a wolf that came or something else happened, and so they use it on them. They use the oil mixed with some kind of perfume, spices, and so on. And we have some hint about how that was done, which is another matter. But for the anointing of prophets, priests, and kings. What does the word Christos mean? What? The anointed one. Jesus is the anointed one. He is what? Prophet, priest, and king. He's all of those. And he is named the anointed one. So it comes from this idea of using the olive oil. But he was anointed by what? God spoke from heaven. You remember when John baptized him and he came up out of the water. And so he began that, and he began his ministry. He was anointed to the ministry. And also it provided light in the house. You had to have light in the house. So you go turn the switch on, what do you get? Something like that. Now that lamp, I can tell you, is an authentic first century lamp. That's a lamp used during the time of Jesus. I won't tell you where in the house it's located, but there are people who have seen it in its in situ, as archaeologists say, in place. And I lit it myself. It still burns. I just use Wesson oil or olive oil. Works real good. But regular oil, the regular olive oil would be good, and that's what they used in that. And usually, of course, wherever you see these that have been set out to burn and to use, they are pretty messy. It's oil all around it, and they don't look too good. Okay, let's move on then to date palms. Everybody, when they're young, is interested in a date. And they have a lot of these in the Jordan Valley and in the Arabah. You know what the Arabah is? Have I not talked about the Arabah? Sure I have. The Arabah, you remember that thing that goes all the way from Turkey? That ridge, that ditch, and where the earthquakes can go down along there. So it goes all the way to not only Eilat in the Dead, it goes through the Dead Sea. So of course first the Sea of Galilee, then the Dead Sea, and then it goes down to Africa. And what's that country there? What? Yeah, not Kenya, the one before that that's always troublemakers. Somalia, yeah. So it cuts right through there. And it's like California. Some people hope it'll just cut off and become an island. I just said some people. I'll find out who are Californians. In the Jordan Valley, this is down north of the Dead Sea where this particular picture was made, I believe. And you'll see just many of these, and a lot of these come from California. A lot of them come from there. And they use a lot of fruit things. And this is as the dates ripen. And of course that's good. And I'm sure that people can use these in various formats. They seem to be sold in the markets and in special little packages, that you can buy and take home as souvenirs and so on. Well, let's continue down through this Arabah. And we're going to come to a little town, just a little community called Keturah. And Keturah is where Methuselah lives. Now, Methuselah, if you haven't heard about him, is the oldest man mentioned in the Bible, right? 969 years of age. But here's something that happened that's quite interesting. At this place called the Arava Institute, they have Methuselah. When Masada was excavated, along about the early 70s, Yigal Yadin, who was one of the most famous Israeli archaeologists, and he was working there, and he discovered the people that were destroyed there in AD 70, they were eating olives. Not olives, but they were dates. They were eating dates. This also happened, incidentally, at Lachish. I think I have a picture of this, but I didn't have time to locate it. They had a picture of the date pits that were right there by the wall where the Israeli soldiers, the Israelites, Judeans, where they were eating these. You got to have a snack, even during wartime. And so that's what they were eating. And so here we are, and we're at Masada, north of where this is. And he found all these seed. There weren't too many. It seems like it's a dozen or so that he found. He gave them, or put them in the, not like a personal gift, but he put them under the control of a lady who was at a hospital in Israel. I can't think of the name of it now, but it's very famous. It's as famous as Bethesda is here. And Hadassah or something like that. And so she was an expert in these kind of old things, old patients and so on. And so we know that these were how old? That was destroyed around 70 AD. You got that? All right, so they go back to the 1st century. All right, so here are the seed. She put them in some kind of proper storage, and she had a friend by the name of Soloway, and Soloway joined with her. They were both experts in this kind of study, and they began to work on what they could do with these, and could they have a date from the 1st century AD. And that's just a few years ago when they started this. So let's look at what happened. Leon was with me on this trip. We drove into Keturah, just off the Highway 90. And when we walked in there, or drove in, we were looking for Methuselah. We saw a lady in a white outfit, the lady who's there. And we stopped let down our windows, and we said to her, "We're looking for the palm." And we had no idea who she was. And she said, "Go straight to the parking lot." So we went straight to the parking lot, pulled into the parking lot. It really was just another part of the yard. All of it was very plain. And we pulled in there, and by the time we pulled in there and got out of the car, she was there. We could have said, "Would you like a ride?" We didn't know how far she was going, of course. So we get down there, and here she is waiting for us. She knew we wanted to know about these because we had come all the way to get to this place in the Arabah. So she tells us about it. That's Methuselah behind me. And the little sign tells about the information. I am told that the Russians have done something that goes back even further. At the time, this was the oldest seed that had ever been planted and come up. But she's got a problem. This is a male. It's just like with humans. You're going to have a female. So how are you going to do that? Now, I would ask Dr. Winton, but he's not here anymore. He would know about this. So, what? Chloe? Clone it. Clone what? This one? Yeah. And so what's going to happen? Or she planted other seeds, but she actually was taking, I guess, cuttings. I don't know how she was doing it. And so she takes the cuttings, and she said, what she really said, after we got our pictures here, she said, "Would you like to see some balm of Gilead?" You ever heard anybody say, "Would I?" We said, "Yes, we would love to see some balm of Gilead." She said, "What about some myrrh?" "Yes, we would love to see some myrrh." Here we are like little schoolboys. "Please give us a piece of candy." So just feet away, 10 feet maybe 15 to the door, she takes us in this hothouse, and we go in there, and she shows us she already has all of these ready. And I had one picture, I didn't look at it recently, but it had a lot of the names on it. And one of them really got my attention. It was named Eve. I think she had plans for Eve and Methuselah. So, there you go. Now, there were some also with other names, all of them biblical names. There was David, there was Ruth, there was, well-known names from the Scripture. And as we continued, she said she would show us this myrrh, or the balm of Gilead. And she just reached over and plucked off one of the little, what I'd call little buds that were there. And here's the way these things look. You see it? Where she pulled it off? Yeah. And I don't even have to use this. See, I outsmarted you. So, there you go, right there. That's where she pulled it off. And showed us that, And that is balm of Gilead. Is there no balm in Gilead? No. This is a famous statement. And she said that a lot of this does grow well in Gilead. There are lots of places where you can get this, and it's very good. Now, this is significant in a number of ways. Even historically, it was significant because when Vespasian, he was the Roman general, who was going against the city of Jerusalem. And his plan was that he would take the city. But he got word that Nero had died. Remember that? And so he headed back to Rome. His son, Titus, became the one who actually finished the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem. So that's Vespasian. And look, he minted a coin. This is the coin. And see what it is called? Judea Capta. We've captured Judea. And what does it show? It shows a palm tree. And what else? It shows Judea sitting under the palm tree crying. So the palm was very important. Important enough that the conqueror of the country used it on his coins. And it was used, the date palm was used on many of the little coins that were throughout the whole first century, the various procurators and so on. One side would have date palms on them, and many of them. And I have copies of those. I mean, not copies, real things of those as well. So Dr. Soloway had written a little book she told us about, and I got a copy of it. I think I've got the title on the next page. It's a Kindle book you can get. And she said frankincense, myrrh, and balm of Gilead are being tested for their medicinal properties in modern times, as they have proved to be anti-inflammatories and germicides, and to have anti-cancer properties in addition to their other qualities. They may become very important to modern medicine in the near future. Now, the lady back at the hospital was also working on this. And she said, but in the ancient world, these trees were important enough to set off trade wars, initiate conquest, and save defeated and despised people from the worst intention of their conquerors. Clearly, the people of that time knew something about these trees and their products that we do not know. What else might be revealed by a serious investigation of the trees of fragrance and mystery? That's the title of her book, a little book, Trees of Fragrance and Mystery. And so that shows you that there's real serious work. I'd heard about another gentleman up on the northern end of the Dead Sea who was working on plants. And I mentioned that to her. She said he's mostly interested in the religious plants, that is, what would be used for the spices and things in the temple, various things that were used in the temple. And she and her friend at the hospital were working more on medicine, and that was their concern. Now, they had dates, and since that time, since we were there, what year was that? 2018, I believe. Since that time, they have actually had a lunch with those dates. They took a wild tree that they found out in the wilderness. Wilderness doesn't have much except a tree here and there. And so they took that and they bred it with the one that is here. And that was the outcome of it, that they really did get dates. So this is what can happen, and this is when people are interested in these things. And that's why your medicine costs so much. See, we always want to know about the medicine. Now let's go back to the wheat, because I realized I hadn't told you about all these things about it. Those are Gene Taylor's hands. He had an announcement last week about his daughter and his granddaughter. Her father is not well. Remember, he's had a stroke. And so this is Gene Taylor's hands. He was with me in eastern Turkey. And so we said, Gene, show us how it was when Jesus talked about this, when he said the disciples were going through the grain fields. And they went through the grain fields and they took this grain and they started to eat it. And what did the Pharisees, what did the Jews do? what did they always do? They objected, didn't they? They always thought something was wrong. And so they decide that they're going to do something about it. They get after him about that, and he gives them a few illustrations, like David and so on, who ate things at a time when they were, for example, hungry and were about to starve, and they ate stuff that only the priest should eat. But he didn't condemn them for that. And so what do? So we're showing that he has wheat here. And now, what are you going to have to do if you're going to eat that? What have you got to do? We talked about it last week. You got to crush it. You got to separate the wheat from the chaff. Got it. What do you got to do? Winnow it. How would you do that? Right? So the chaff goes that way, and then you've got the wheat in your hand, and what do? So you see, they charge them with all these things as work. I mean, look at these people. They're out here gathering grain. They're out here winnowing, threshing. That's work. And of course, it's like his other illustration about the donkey that's in the ditch on the Sabbath. It's okay to get him out. So that's what happened after he crushed this in his hand. I would have made him crush longer, but we weren't really wanting to eat it, but we did want to illustrate it. And then after that, we have a picture here of some barley, and the word for barley really is a word that means whiskers. You see what's different about barley? It's got the long stem. And so barley. Now the barley, we said, came in 1 month earlier than the wheat. So, who ate the barley? The poor people. It's not as good as wheat. So, when you go get that loaf of bread, be sure you get wheat bread, not barley bread. Right? So, that was the possibility that they had. They could have barley early, they could have wheat later on. And there would be some people who might eat both, might be able to eat both, but they want to start with the wheat or the barley because it comes in first. So it looks different. And I'm sorry that I have never seen the darnels, that's what the word is that's called, the darnels in the wheat. Jesus talked about the weeds in the wheat, remember that? And I've had guides to tell me, yes, I've seen them, but I don't see any in this patch. But I have a book that has pictures of it. And it looks pretty much the same, a little different, but pretty much the same. And enough so that this would cause a person to say, well, let's just go ahead and cut it all and then we'll take it out later on. Get up there and we'll ask some of the workers to take it out. Or something like that. So that's a possibility. So that's barley in Jordan. How did a family, pretty good sized family, or a little community, how did they grind this? Well, they took two pieces here. The bottom piece, and I could find pictures where there's nothing left but just the bottom. It's a cone like this. That's in the bottom. Then they take this top piece and put down over it, and then it's open at the top and the bottom. You see that? See how it fits here so that this is, which one? This one. That's the bottom one coming down like that. And then this top piece goes over it like here. All right. So now then we put the wheat or the barley in the sides, any other kind of grain that we needed to trim, cut, crush. And so now what do? Well, we've got a place right here on the side where we can put a pole, a short pole. And we can just put that in there and just start walking around. And that Do you know what that black is, what that material is? Basalt. Who said that? Roland. He knows everything. He could lift that. Yes, it's basalt. Why would they have basalt? This is in Galilee. Why would they have basalt there? Why not make it out of limestone? Too soft. Try even more basic. They don't have any. There are somewhere in the country, but they don't have any there. And so early buildings, you can find whole buildings in the Golan Heights that are made out of basalt. And just a few miles north of the Sea of Galilee, I made this picture. There's some cows out there. I think I've got one covered up with the sign. And these are pieces of basalt. What is basalt? Where does it come from? What caused the formation of the Sea of Galilee? What? Yeah. Anybody ever heard? Anybody been over there and heard of the horns of Hattin? No? Oh, it's one of the most famous formations there is, the horns of Hattin. And what goes on at the horns of Hattin? It looks like the horns of a saddle. Like it comes up high on the end and goes in like that, like you're riding the saddle. And so horns of Hattin, and that's where the decisive battle between Saladin from Egypt met the Crusaders in 1159 maybe. Jonathan, I may ask you to tell me. He's got me close enough. So around that time, and at that time, that was the end of the Christian movement. So from then on, it was going to be primarily the other way around. And all the Sea of Galilee is a volcanic. This goes from north of the Sea of Galilee all the way down to past Bethshan. In other words, 30 miles further south. And so that's one very significant thing about the area where Jesus lived. Olive brushing? I got this in the wrong place. But what time is it? We have six minutes, basically. All right, so I'm sure they won't give us 6, but we have it anyway. So look here's a way of crushing. You put the olives in the little bags. See those bags there? And then you put a rock on top of it or something. You take this pole and pull it out here, and then you put pressure on that to squeeze these. Okay, got it? All right, now watch what happens. Here's another way now for grain. And this one is a small, but it's not conical. It is a small stone, just a solid stone. It has a stone that we have probably drilled a hole in. And then we drilled a place on the side over here on the right where you see the little small stick, and we're going to turn it around. 2 women work at these often. You'll see them doing it. I'm being where they illustrate it. And so one pulls it like this, the other one pulls it like this, we pull it like this, and the grain is poured in from the center, and then on this one you see some of the grain has actually come out over here. It's ready to go in the pie. So that's pretty good, isn't it? That's the way it's done. Those are lentils. You like lentil soup? We'll fix some and start with it on Wednesday. Thank you for being here tonight.